This podcast is sponsored by nobody. Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today I will be welcoming a very talented character actress who was based in Chicago, and she started out in Improv, and I'm talking about Sherry Narens. I've been trying to get in touch with her for a long time, and Robert Swan put me in touch with her recently. She was in some cult movies back in the 80s. She was in Big Shots. She's having a baby. Poltergeist 3, Meet the Applegates, and she's also written some plays, and we're going to talk about all of that stuff today, and I cannot wait. Like I said, it's been a long time coming. The first time I remember actually noticing her and seeing her was in a TV movie called Listen to Your Heart, where she flirts with Tim Matheson in this scene when he's in the bookstore buying copies of his own book, and she's like complimenting, his writing. And it's going to be a great conversation. I know this morning has been very hard for all of us Americans, but we'll get through it. I don't know how or when, but we will get through it. We just got to have hope for the future. So yeah, here is my interview with Sherry Narens.
Hello.
Hey Sherry, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well.
Well, this is such a great honor. Thank you for taking the time this morning.
It's nice to be an honor.
So, going back in time, did you gravitate toward acting early on in your childhood?
I actually did, and I was discouraged at every turn. I was meant to be either a doctor or a scientist of some sort, because that's what was fashionable then. And also that's because my Jewish mother wanted that. And I just kept getting more and more interested in acting and kept it up no matter what I thought I was studying, and eventually left college because of the conflict that caused.
So you never made an attempt to try medicine or any of that?
No, I actually applied to one school in pre-med, and they wanted me to make a decision for sure that that's what I wanted, and I wasn't about to do that. When I applied to University of Chicago, where I wound up, I was interested in virology at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a department of virology, which was unusual then. And before I even started my first term, that was off the table. So, because my roommate, who was supposed to be majoring in, I think it was chemistry,
Mm-hmm.
wrote her first musical when she was 9 years old, and we just did stuff all the time. So
Nice.
It was an easy distraction that drew me toward my fate.
Yeah. So did you participate in school plays and community theater and all of that?
Not before college. I well, some stuff. Yeah, I mean, there was some youth group stuff, and yes, I suppose the answer is yes. But it wasn't very. My big show was 8th grade. I played Buttercup in HMS Pinafore.
Oh, nice.
It was, it was. People said nice things about it, and my mother was kind of embarrassed. Because I had age makeup on because I was Buttercup, and thought I looked weird, so she dragged me away. But it was very Dead Poets Society.
Yeah, mother knows best.
Yeah.
So are you born and raised in Chicago?
Yeah. And I finally grew up and left home when I was in my mid-40s.
Wow.
Moved to Eugene.
Mm-hmm.
And, which, at that point, I had been working a lot in new play development, and I was kind of a macher at Chicago Dramatists. And I was running into people mostly who were treating me as my resume and not as me. So I thought if I went to Oregon, I would be me, which I became.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got a little lonely when my resume got lost, and that's life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's showbiz.
Right. I kept writing. I put most of my energy into writing the last some years.
Mm-hmm. So did you attend college?
In college, some. Because I had no idea how to do that, I wound up being the runner-up for a whole series of lead roles.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually just sort of in the chorus after that, because the directors just kind of said, well, yeah, she's just been around. But that didn't stop me. Actually, what happened was in my second year of college, I think it was, a group called Urban Gateways in Chicago got started. And my roommate, who was no longer a chemistry major, but at that point a musicology major, wrote the music for the first show that Urban Gateways did. And it was a little show about how to put on a play to be performed in grade school. And I was the playwright who became Little Red Riding Hood. All the people who made the play then became the play. And the guy who was the big bad wolf went off and started his own improv company and invited me to join it. And there was no turning back.
Oh, is that the new old-fashioned Barrico Compass players?
Yeah, it was at the Baroque Bar, and we just called ourselves the New Compass until we found out that there was a trademark on Compass. So we hid Compass in a longer name.
Yeah.
Just in case we needed to drop it. And we closed every venue we ever worked in. It was we worked for a long time, but all of the venues had one problem or another. One had a drug bust, and one just went out of business, and the Harper Theater had a fire. I mean, it was just really kind of amazing. But the group lasted for several years, and we did some pretty astonishing stuff by the end, improvising hour-long shows without even discussing what we were going to do with plots and subplots and music in unison. And not to say that it was good, but it was amazing that it happened at all.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to Ed Asner before he passed. You know, he was a member of the original Compass Players in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which led to Second City, and he was there with Nichols and May and Bern Piven and Joy Carlin, who I also talked to, and yeah.
Severin Darden was my idol.
Oh, Severin Darden was the best. The way he could make bland dialogue hilarious, it was just astounding.
Yeah, it was just. I mean, at the Second City 25th anniversary party. He was kind of flirting with me in the food line.
Oh, yeah?
And I didn't know what to do because I simply could not respond to him because he was such a huge figure in my brain. I couldn't even speak in his presence.
Wow.
Sorry, Severin.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was amazing. He was just amazing.
How many of you were in the group?
It changed over time. There was a lot of turnover at the beginning, and the group as it wound up, Bob Curry, who had started it, moved on to Second City. And the guy named Bill Bezdek sort of ran the thing, and we wound up with, I think it was 7 or 8 of us. And we worked out just a format where there would be action in this lighting area, and if you ran out of things to say, the person on the lights would turn out the light there and turn on the light somewhere else, and someone would just have to walk into that light and continue the story at a different level. So, and we did exercises like thematic temporizing.
Yeah, wow.
What to do when you have no clue. And it was great fun, and we did some really nifty stuff.
Yeah, were you all aware that you were in the middle of a comedy revolution at that time?
No, we were aware that that part of the world was busy. I mean, I was, I just, when I watched the Beatles Get Back documentary,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that the month that that was shot was the month that I did my first Second City Touring Company show.
Nice.
So I had very specific memories of exactly those days in my life in Chicago. It's been sort of this interesting time of reflection the last few months since that came out. But yeah, I just knew there was a lot. There was lots going on, and when our touring company was doing good work, so we just decided to go someplace else and do shows on our own. And Second City realized we were doing shows at a bar nearby, and opened this theater on Monday nights so that we could do shows and they could hold on to us.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, comedy was getting irreverent, and you had, Firesign Theater, Cheech and Chong, Second City, and then you had stand-up guys like George Carlin, Richard Pryor, Robert Klein. I mean, it was a huge change in the world at that time.
I know, and I mean, it was pretty fun. It was definitely fun. I can remember during that same period of time, in late '69, there was a benefit for the Chicago 7 conspiracy that was run by Wavy Gravy. And I was working with a small group of people who weren't affiliated with anybody except each other, when we called ourselves that night I don't know if we were the Radioactive Players, but something like that. And we wanted to open our little skit, our little set with kazoos. And there were no kazoos to be had anywhere in Chicago.
Wow. It
was kind of amazing. And we got to the theater that night, and the place was packed to the rafters. It was just astonishing. It was just great. Like 300 hippies in Second City. And Wavy Gravy came out on stage, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, our national anthem." And 300 kazoos played the national anthem.
300 kazoos.
It was one of the most amazing things I've ever heard.
Wow. That's something we need today. God.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We need that kind of political energy in comedy, too. I mean, it's happening in late-night comedy, and that's great. It was on the street. We were everywhere doing stuff.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, did you ever see the City Lights Improv group?
No.
That must have came a little bit later. I talked to Carol Schindler, who was in that group. She said that Robin Williams was a big fan of theirs, and he used to meet up with them like whenever they were in any town that he happened to be in, and they'd go up on stage and improvise.
That's great.
Yeah.
I used to the touring company that I was in became the resident company without me, which is a long and terribly bitter story. But I used to hang around in case they finally noticed that they really did need me. And so I would be there for the set a lot of times, and I would improvise on the set now and then. And this is a great story. I was there one night when it was the night the Del Close came back to Chicago, and Peter Boyle happened to be in town to do some voiceover work.
Wow.
And we all did the set, and then Peter and Del's girlfriend at the time named George, and David Bloom, who had a Volkswagen Bug, and I all got into the Bug and drove around Lower Wacker Drive, because going through the green part of Lower Wacker Drive was really, really cool late at night.
Yeah.
And then we all went someplace and had something to eat, and and I dated Peter for a little while, and it was just it was an interesting time. And there were three big men in that. Oh, Ira Miller was there too. That was the other one. He was another big man. Yeah, and David and me and George, all in this bug, and it was, it was pretty astonishing.
That's so awesome. In 19... I was going to say,
go on.
In 1974, you did the play Slag. How did you get involved with that?
I auditioned for it. Improv had faded from my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was determined to be the kind of real actress I had always wanted to be, and I auditioned for it. And again, I knew nothing about doing real plays.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of amazed that I got through it pretty well, which I just simply pulled off on raw talent, I think, because it wasn't until just, 20 years ago, I went to England and spent a summer learning how to act and learned that I really did have talent, and if I'd known all that stuff 40 years earlier, I would have had a career. So, it's just one of those things. But yeah, and that was around the time, too, that I started working in new play development. So I was performing in staged readings of a different new play almost every week for 11 years. And that was just a great acting workout. In a lot of ways, it was more fun than doing a full show. Because you just have to it's sort of a mashup between improv and regular stage work. Because you have to make instant choices to do something believable in an environment you haven't really thought through.
Yeah. And then, of course, Chicago was getting to be a really good theater scene at that time, because Steppenwolf was starting to happen, and you had all these just amazing actors coming out of there, including our mutual friend Robert Swan, who connected us.
Right. Yeah, I knew him from college, which is very weird. We were sort of intermittent friends. Mm-hmm. Our whole lives. It's been sort of interesting. I'm going back to Slag because this is another great story. We did the show at, it was a space it was in Uptown, and I can't remember the name of the space. It was a nice theater, and David Mamet had just done Squirrels and the other one right before we went on, and we needed a light man, and Bill Macy wasn't doing anything, so he did our lights. And, it was like what became Atlantic Theater and our little group of slaggers just sort of all hung out together because we were all just sort of hanging around.
Yeah, who's the group?
Well, Gary Houston directed, and Cretia Fairchild, who has done quite well in the last few years after a long gap in her career, was in it. And, I'm blanking on the name of it was a three-woman play. Joanne something, I think.
Was Belinda Bremner?
No, she wasn't in that one.
Okay.
I mean, I knew her from Body Politic, but yeah. Anyway, it was a sort of a fun. It's just people just did shit,
Yeah.
One of the most exciting theater experiences I ever had was going to see Warp. The Warp Part 1 blew my mind in every possible way. It was the definition of how to make a bare theater with no tech into a action movie. I mean, it was just screamingly funny and so popular that the job of the ushers was just to jam people closer together on benches. Mm-hmm. And they collected money on the exit, not on the entrance, and made enough money that they were forced to join equity.
Yeah. Was the equity rules really strict in those days?
Not really, but they were just breaking it in, and they had no reason not to. Organic theater did quite well from there on. Not organic. That was it organic? No, it's not organic. It's the other one. Yes, it is. Sorry. Because they shared space eventually.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter.
What about doing Guys and Dolls?
That was just a blast. It was the kind of thing I had simply never imagined I would do, and I wasn't much of a singer, and I could dance, but I couldn't do tap. And I went into the audition figuring I could take a really long shot at the lead, but I figured, I don't know, maybe I could do General Cartwright, and I knew I could do the dance part of the audition. And the dance part was all tap, because Ken Berry played Sky Masterson, and they wrote big breaks into his songs so he could do tap with.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a brilliant dancer. What a hoofer. I mean, just great, and a lovely man. And so I was like 28 and playing General Cartwright and being old and severe. And Ken would hit the stage and and do this little scene with me, and then he'd walk off, and I had to say, "What a remarkable young man." It always made me kind of go,
yeah. You could probably play that role again.
Yeah, now would be the good time to do it.
Yeah. So according to IMDb, your first on-screen role was as the bookstore saleswoman in the TV movie "Listen to Your Heart," which I love.
You mentioned that, yeah. It was a fun shoot. It was just one little scene, and Tim Matheson was trying to be funny and obviously a little bit stressed for some reason, and he did exactly the same gag in every single entrance. When he walked into entrance to before we started shooting,
yeah.
He'd walk into the set and pretend to trip every single time. And I finally called him on it, and he wasn't happy. But it's interesting that was the only role I've ever played that generated communication from a creep. Some guy in another state had seen me in this thing and told me he was a casting director, and he wanted me to send him pictures of me dressed as a cheerleader.
Really? Well, like I told you in the email, you were a hottie then.
Yeah. But I did a bunch of other stuff when I was around the same age. It never generated, there was something about that moment and that T-shirt, I don't know.
Well,
whatever.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, all men have the fantasy of being flirted with by a librarian, a nurse, a chambermaid, a bartender, all that stuff, so that's where it comes from. I mean, I got to act out on the bartender thing because I worked in the bar business for a lot of years, but yeah, I remember, yeah, you don't know that he's the writer of that book, and you tell him that he has the je ne sais quoi mal jus. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun because it was a complete mystery to me, and I was learning things. Eventually, I actually spent a lot of time on a set where I was writing scripts and learned all the things that I should have known earlier about, who does what on the set and who's really useful to suck up to and who's not. Well, the who's not is everybody's, you got to be nice to everybody because they're people. But, yeah, it was,
yeah.
They're all good memories.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tim Matheson and Kate Jackson had great chemistry in that.
Yeah, I barely remember it. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I heard he's a nice guy, though.
Yeah, I mean, he seemed to be. I think one of the reasons that I called him on his repeated gag was that I was hoping to actually have a conversation with him.
Yeah.
He seemed like somebody I'd enjoy talking to.
Yeah. Then you played a teacher in a movie I love called Big Shots.
Yeah. I think that's the show. I think that's the movie that I just got a 2-cent residual check for that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's after taxes. It was 3 cents before taxes.
Yeah, I talked to that the kid in that Ricky Busker a few years ago, and so many people were shocked that I found him. You know, because a lot of people of my generation remember that movie, and they always wondered what happened to him. He was so good in that movie.
That movie was. It was really an astonishing experience. That's the one where I read Martin Luther King, right? And it was just to have to, without particular expression, read those words
Mm-hmm.
to what was basically a class of people who may or may not have heard it. They had a bunch of kids in the room, you know?
Yeah.
And it was a long time ago. And it was kind of a stunning experience. I don't think my face was ever on camera in that one, but
Yeah. But definitely,
walking around the room, yeah.
yeah, definitely. I remember those words, and it was a turning point in the kid's life because he just lost his father, and
Right.
he's looking for an emotional out, and those words were the turning point for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a good interview. He's been through an awful lot since that movie, and he's a very nice guy.
There's a lot of people are really nice at heart. I haven't met too many people who aren't.
I think so too. Absolutely. Then you played a nurse in John Hughes. She's having a baby.
Yes, and I had to audition by laughing at Kevin Bacon's broom sample. So
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin Bacon was in the room, and I
Yeah.
had to laugh at him in the audition. It was one of the challenging auditions of my life. It was fun.
It was awkward though.
Well, it's odd, and it gives me a low Kevin Bacon number.
Yeah, I remember that so well. Yeah, a lot of people like that movie. A lot of people think it's John Hughes' most underrated. What was he like as a director?
I liked him. It was the second time I'd worked with him, although the first time I wound up not being in the final cut. I was supposed to be the bus driver in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, really?
And it was the last shot that they had scheduled for the whole filming schedule in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And they just ran out of time because it was raining. And they wound up redoing it in LA. But I had I had learned how to drive the bus and everything. And when I did She's Having a Baby, John said that he was really sorry they hadn't taken an extra day in Chicago because LA just looked wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That sequence just looked wrong. It didn't fit with the rest of the movie.
I tried to get the woman who played the bus driver at Ferris Bueller's Day Off when I first started the podcast 5 years ago, and at first she was interested, and then at that time I was like presenting myself on camera, and the camera work was bad and stuff, so I think she was turned off by that. Yeah, her name's Dee Dee Reicher.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You've talked about bus drivers now.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
I've been taking the bus my whole life, so it's only natural. But yeah, She's Having a Baby was actually filmed just before Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And if you watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, there's a scene from the movie in there on the TV screen.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it came out 3 months after Planes, Trains, and Automobiles did.
Well, that's even funnier.
Yeah. Yeah, John Hughes had a little in-joke meta reference there.
Great.
How about making Poltergeist 3?
Oh, that was fun because I went to grade school with Gary Sherman.
Oh, yeah?
And I've known him all my life. And I went to pick up the pages for the audition, and I wanted to audition for that solely so I could say hi to Gary, who I hadn't seen in like God knows how many years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to the casting director's office, she said, he's here. You want to go say hello? And I wasn't ready to audition. I just picked up the pages. So I went in, said hello to him, and accused him of collaborating with the kid in our class who made my life miserable for years. And I thought, yeah, this is the way to get a part. I said, you helped him. But we chatted, and then when we got to the shoot, I was pleased that I wound up auditioning that day, just sitting around in that easy conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got to the shoot, Gary's parents were there, and I realized, well, I recognized them. I was at his bar mitzvah.
Mm-hmm.
They were both shorter than they were.
Yeah.
I think I dug out a snapshot from the school picnic, our 8th grade school picnic that he was in, and sent it to him.
Yeah. I've been trying to get Gary Sherman on here. I like a lot of his movies, and I've heard that this was not a very happy shoot overall for some of the actors and stuff. I haven't.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Poltergeist 3 got very weird. Yeah.
I mean, the whole franchise in general of Poltergeist has a weird aura around it. They say the franchise is cursed. Because people have died. Including Heather O'Rourke, who died on this one.
Right, he died just before they shot the last couple of scenes.
Yeah.
And they didn't shoot that stuff because there was a director's strike that started right then.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to go pick it up later, and wound up having to fudge a whole lot of stuff to cover the fact that she was dead. So it made for a strange environment. But I mean, working with Gary was great, and I wound up running into him at a League of Chicago Theaters retreat.
Mm-hmm. We
hadn't talked since we were in grade school, or high school, I guess. I was in high school with him for a couple of years before I moved. And we sat up all night, literally sat up all night talking. It was just a blast.
Yeah, a little alcohol involved.
Yeah, there was alcohol involved.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, when she died, I was like 4.5 years old. There was a part of me that was happy because I was always scared when I heard, they're here. But that's awful, though, that she had to die so young like that.
Well, apparently she had a congenital condition
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know if anybody even knew about. So, yeah, it was weird. But
Mm-hmm. Nancy,
I was only in one scene, but it was a fun scene. So.
Did you work with Nancy Allen?
No. I worked with, what's his name?
Tom Skerritt?
Say again? No. I didn't work with Tom Skerritt at all. I met those people, but I don't know why.
Probably a rap party or something.
Yeah, I mean, one scene doesn't take all day, so they might have been on the set for something else.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Zelda Rubinstein, she plays the witchy woman.
Right. Now, the guy who played my husband was the guy from Warp, and he played the schoolmaster. And I'm blanking on his name. He was very funny.
I'm looking it up
Real
here.
life. Yeah. Yeah, mostly we were just tasting soup together.
I'm a huge fan of Meet the Applegates. How was making that?
Oh, that was a career in itself. It was a location for a long time, and then pick up scenes in LA afterwards. So it was just great. Playing a bug named Hector was a terrific job. And
yeah. It was made right at the end of New World Pictures. They had problems distributing it.
Yeah, there there was a lot of, I think there was a lot of budget overrun because they just didn't get the bug suits working right. And so whenever they were shooting bug scenes, it just took a lot longer than they thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't involved in that because I was the bug when it was in human form. So, yeah, but I got to know a lot of people who happened to live in Wisconsin.
Right.
And spent a lot of time talking to Dabney Coleman over drinks late at night. And that was great fun.
Yeah, I heard he's no nonsense, but he'd be a lot of fun.
Well, there was an election coming up,
mm-hmm.
and he was really disturbed about having to vote Republican, even though he was a lifelong Republican, because having been a VMI grad,
mm-hmm.
he always looked at second in command, and he didn't trust Dan Quayle.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we went round and round on politics more than once.
Yeah.
And he's actually a really deeply good person.
Yeah. He's from Texas, and he's got that the Southern roots.
And I just said he's a good person, and he said, I don't want to start hearing Dabney Coleman's a good guy. So,
of course.
Dabney, I'm sorry.
Of course, he's got an image to keep. Yeah. Ed Begley Jr., he's a great guy. I sent him a couple emails years ago and asked him questions, and he was happy to reply them back to me. I only have one of those emails still left. I wish I had them all. Did you get to know him a little bit?
Just a little bit. It's interesting that, my strongest memory of him is his instructing, I can't remember who it was, about not responding to people who want autographs while you're eating a meal. That's just not polite, and you don't do it. He had rules. And he was, in some ways, tougher than Dabney,
mm-hmm.
which is interesting. I spent a lot of time with Dabney because the bugs hung out together, but
mm-hmm.
I met the other people. And
Stockard Channing, Glenn Shadix.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Michael Lehman directed it.
Yeah, I can remember him saying, I'm never doing special effects again. And then his career shifted.
Oh yeah, he did Hudson Hawk right after that.
And he did he did more than one. He did a series of special effects movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Michael, what are you thinking? But I guess he decided he had an knack for it. I don't know.
Yeah, because he had just done Heathers with Winona Ryder and Christian Slater. Yeah. Oh, that actor who played your husband in Poltergeist 3 is Richard Fire.
Richard Fire, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Wow, he passed away a month after I got out of the hospital from my car accident.
Really? I think I remember hearing that he passed away.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting older.
I know, I just had my birthday last month. Or actually beginning of this month. I forget, we're not in July yet.
Right. Well, is your birthday June 1st?
It's June 6th.
You're one of a group of people I know with that birthday.
Oh yeah, what's yours?
April 15th.
You're an Aries?
Yeah.
Wow, you seem a lot more humble than most Aries do.
Well, that's because most of my chart is in my 12th house in Libra.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I've got my 12th house is just jammed with planets. It makes for a challenging life.
Yeah, I could have figured you for a Libra.
Yeah. Maybe I'm growing into my intentions. I don't know.
So what made you get into playwriting?
Just that I started dreaming stuff up, I guess. I was working at Chicago Drama as both an actor and a director. And for a good chunk of time, I couldn't afford to join as a playwright. And once I had the money to become a playwright there, I wrote a play called Park Talk, which was produced there when they first started producing. A couple of people, I don't know how Chicago you are. At the corner of Diversity and Lakeshore, there's a statue that says, "To Goethe, the mastermind of the German people, from the German people of Chicago, 1913." And it's like a Greek god standing naked, with one foot up on a stone and an eagle on his knee. And that statue always has pigeons all over it.
Oh.
And most of the play, it's a little half-hour play, is a conversation between two people, older people who've been taking a walk, about pigeons. It was interesting because I wrote it right about the time that David Mamet was writing Squirrels and whatever, and it had the same. David and I grew up listening to the same voices.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to me that, the theme, the underlying theme in his stuff and in my stuff is different, but the voices were similar. I'd stay away from any of David's current themes, but that's a whole other thing.
You wrote Teresa Bassoon.
Bassoon, yeah.
Yeah.
That play. The play is kind of an astonishing experience because I wrote it. I started taking ballet when I was 26, and I stuck with it and got fairly good. So I was taking class with young teens when I was in my 30s, and I was approaching my 40th birthday, and I saw doors closing, and I was thinking about approaching limitation, and surrounded by all of the issues of artistically dedicated children, essentially, who are also going through everything that kids go through in adolescence and their teen years. And I read the back of a record album. It was a recording of the Four Seasons. That Vivaldi's music was originally played by an orchestra of orphan girls, and Vivaldi was a priest. And the girls were known by the names of their instruments, rather than because they were orphans, they had no last names. So there were 3 of these big orphanages in Venice at the time, and they had upwards of 1,000 girls in each one of them. And there was this elite group that was playing music. And then there were the girls who didn't play music, but they were physically okay, and they had arranged little parties so that they could get married off. And then there were the ones who were in the orphanage because there was something physically wrong with them. And they wound up doing menial work. And it was in a lot of ways like high school. There's the elite group and everybody else, and then the geeks. And I was just fascinated by the whole thing. And the play eventually won a big award at the Kennedy Center. And to this date has never been produced.
Wow.
I know. How's that for what?
Yeah. I hope it does get produced eventually.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, it's won other awards, but who knows when its time will come.
And then you also wrote Doors and Tunnels.
Oh, yeah. That was a play I was sure was completely unproducible when I wrote it. It's a 10-minute play. And it's 2 people in a space that's brightly lit, and suddenly a shaft of darkness appears. And I thought, there is no way that you can produce a shaft of darkness on stage. And because they're stuck in this slightly lit space, they go into the darkness, close the door behind them, and the whole place becomes dark. And then a shaft of light appears, and they go through that door. It's a series of doorways, and I don't know, kind of what you imagine is what you get, is sort of what the play is about. But I was astonished that it not only was chosen for production, but they managed to light it in a way that actually approximated the shaft of darkness. So, and the sound guy had a lot of fun with the sounds of different doors. So.
How many plays overall have you written?
I don't really know. A bunch of shorter ones. I think it's maybe 3 full-length plays. Teresa Bassoon, I think, is the only two-act play. But I've written a couple of 90-minute full-length plays. And a couple of things that are about an hour long. One that I wrote more recently that I'm really kind of proud of, but it's sort of stuck between stage and radio format right now. But I put it in radio format for a contest, and by opening it up for the radio, wound up finding things that I didn't find before. But it's a bard is coming to interview this woman whose accidentally magical work has transformed the world. And when I did a reading of it at one point, somebody in the audience described it as a creation myth for a new world. Mm-hmm. It's this woman who has been in the building. She's been I don't know if she was an architect or what. She's involved in development, and gets treated so badly that she winds up just throwing away her credit cards and walking into the park and living outdoors. And she eventually lives in a space under a collapsed highway, so that she's living in the bones of a city. Mm-hmm. And she gets it into her head that if she finds the stones that made up the city and buries them, a new world will come about. And so she finds buildings that are falling down and roads that are falling down and buries those stones, and the land comes alive.
Wow, you go very deep. Did you ever study philosophy?
I've been doing shamanic healing work for about 20 years. Wow.
Yeah, that you write stuff it would never even occur to me to write because that is.
This one actually I wrote during shamanic journeying. I mean, I would go into the shamanic, I guess it's a trance state, mm-hmm. and it came from a journey to the Kovac. It's based on Celtic myth, and the character's name is Callie Archer, and that's taken from Kovac, who gathers the bones of the dead animals during the winter so that they can and she buries them so they can come back to life in the spring. And that's sort of what the story is about, and it came from images that I had in a journey. And when I sat down to write it, I just put a drum tape in my ears and my hands on the keyboard, and that's how it happened.
Nice.
It's kind of magical.
Yeah. So how long have you been in Oregon for?
Well, I'm not in Oregon anymore.
Oh, okay.
Left Oregon because I thought maybe there's actually an acting market in Seattle. I would have been better if I'd gone to Portland, but things had changed and I didn't know it. I wound up in Seattle, and I'm still in Seattle. I was in Oregon for about 12 or 13 years, and I've been in Seattle now for 19 years. Almost 19 years.
My dad lives in Marysville.
See?
Yeah. He's been there 9 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
I keep moving north. I'm trying to get away from sunlight and heat.
Yeah, my grandmother lived there 38 years. My dad had to take care of her the last 3 years that she was alive, and he's been up there ever since. He's finally retiring in November, which is great because I get to see him more.
Uh,
And
nice in this part of the world, I'll tell you. I do like the Pacific Northwest.
yeah, I mean it's nice over there. Just I don't like the rain. That's the only thing, but other than that,
The
yeah.
rain.
Other than that, it's a nice area.
The only thing the rain lacks is thunder and lightning. That's my years in Chicago. Big thunderstorms are just a joy.
Oh, we get a lot of thunder over here in Reading. A lot.
Yeah. Oh, you're east of the rain where you are too.
Yeah, and I mean I'm from San Francisco where we get thunder once a year if we're lucky.
Yeah, that's like Seattle.
Yeah. So do you have any upcoming projects?
Not right now. What I do have is if I can have to finish getting moved into this apartment I've only been in for 2 weeks. There's a play that I wrote several years back. I was trying to get some anger out about something that had happened in my life, and find that I wrote in the process. I was writing something about my family, and that I had accurately reproduced the first generation American Jewish voices that my mother and her sister had, and wrote the story about my own bad story, and realized that there were other layers of the story that had to do with my grandmother, my mother's family. My grandfather basically hauled his whole family from a village in north of Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
where pogroms were bad, to the United States, and they started in St. Louis and wound up in Chicago. His wife, my grandmother's family, stayed there, and the village, which had originally had something like 14,000 people, mostly Jewish,
Mm-hmm.
only had 14 individuals that survived the Second World War. And so I didn't realize growing up, and I only really came to realize very recently, what my grandmother was living through my whole lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
The huge loss in her life. And when my Aunt Bela, who was one of my grandfather's sisters, would come by, and the two of them would have these long conversations with glasses of tea and a little sugar between their teeth,
Yeah.
And they talked in Yiddish. They were talking about things that I wasn't meant to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to find a way to insert that into the play without it taking over the play. But it's part of the world I grew up in that I didn't even realize was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because my grandmother lived with us. So,
Yeah.
that's the next project if I can ever figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah. I mean,
That's always too.
it must be hard to get a play going now. With COVID been going on the last few years.
Right. Actually, that's why I was thinking about Callie Archer being a radio play. It was something that was possible.
Yeah.
But I'm not really good at marketing my stuff.
Yeah, I can relate.
Writing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made a joke years ago that my stuff would be produced posthumously for the benefit of my heirs. And it's the kind of thing that you should never say out loud because your subconscious hears it and says, oh, okay.
Yeah. Sherry, you are so amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today and telling me these great stories.
Yeah, God, we've only scratched the surface of the stories, let me tell you. But, sometime we'll have a conversation. Sure, this has been actually a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I talked to somebody the other day who was also on the fence about doing it, and then, she ended up being, delighted by the time we finished and stuff. Yeah, I try to make it easy for my guests and just to have fun, There's no message to the podcast other than tell stories, laugh, and have a good time.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that Robert could connect us. So,
Yes, I am too.
ah,
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Bob Swan.
yes, absolutely. Well, you have yourself a great day, and please be safe out there and enjoy your new place.
Thank you, and good thoughts to you too. All those things.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. Sherry Narens. Ain't she a sweetheart? What a great lady, huh? And those were great stories. I'm so glad we got to talk today. And thank you so much, Robert Swan, for connecting us. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes.